Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 487 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our fifth book just came out. It's called Perseverance and How to Be a Great Fraternity or Sorority Alumnus. So go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. So today we are going to be talking about civic courage. And I think that this conversation is so timely, especially with this election that is right around the corner in a couple of months here. We're all going to be electing the next president of the United States. So I think this is really important to be talking about democracy right now. It's more critical than ever. And I know our next guest is going to have a lot to say about it. Why? Because in 1980, Sam Daley-Harris founded the anti-poverty lobby. It's called Results, and its sister organization, Results Educational Fund. In 1990, he organized the World Summit for Children Candlelight Vigils. In 1994, the first edition of Reclaiming Our Democracy, Healing the Break Between People and Government was released. The 30th anniversary edition is going to be released this year. In 1995, Sam founded the Microcredit Summit Campaign along with Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus and FINCA founder John Hatch. In 2012, Sam founded Civic Courage. Civic Courage helps NGOs to train their members to create champions in Congress and the media for their cause. Interestingly enough, Sam's first client was Citizens Climate Lobby. And in 2019, Citizens Climate Lobby volunteers in the United States and Canada had over 4,300 letters to the editor, op-eds, and editorials published. And that's up from only 65 in 2010. And they also had 1,700 meetings with members of Congress, Parliament, or their staff, which is up from 106 in 2010. So that shows you can get results, and that is absolutely incredible. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Great to be here. Thanks so much.
Hey, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. You know, you've had such an interesting career that I think our college student listeners are really going to get a kick out of it, especially, as we sit here and we watch the DNC every night, right in the midst of an election here in the United States. Let's talk about your background first. I know you grew up in Miami. You went to Florida State in Tallahassee for your freshman year, and then returned home for the rest of college at the University of Miami. So why did you choose Florida State freshman year? And then why did you return to the University of Miami?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to tell this story, but because it involves the cost of college and the cost of college 60 years ago. And my daughter and son have just finished one at UNC in North Carolina and the other at Bryn Mawr in Pennsylvania. I know what college costs, but anyway, the year is 1964. I'm very interested in music. We have a family friend that recommends some schools I should apply to, and I applied to and get in. I don't know that I would these days. Oberlin, Carnegie Institute of Technology. It's now Carnegie Mellon, Indiana University, Florida State University, and University of Miami. I get into all of them, but we can only afford the cheapest. And the cheapest was Florida State University. This is the embarrassing part, whose tuition was $125 a trimester, not a credit, not a course, a trimester.
Sign me up.
And so there I was, what we could afford growing up a long time ago. And it's 1964. And I remember I'm at a history 181 class. It's one of those, like 300 students freshman year kind of thing. And there's, I don't know what it was, fire hoses, cattle prods in Alabama, just north and west of Tallahassee, where Florida State is. And too many of the students were like kind of rooting on for the fire hoses and cattle prods. And I didn't feel at home.
Oh,
uh, in 1964 in northern Florida. The old story was in Florida, the farther south you went, the farther north you went, because Miami at that time was a suburb of New York City,
right.
and now it's a suburb of Havana, Cuba, which is great, kind of thing. So after freshman year, at $125 a trimester, I transferred to the University of Miami and finished my college there. It's a longer story, but that's the essence of it.
Yeah, wow, that's such an interesting time that you were there in college, and I certainly understand going north by going south to Miami. That makes perfect sense to me. As somebody who grew up in New York, I understand that we have a ton of people that end up moving to Miami and to Florida in general.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
really fascinating story. And boy, oh boy, I'll sign up for that $120 a semester. Sign me up right now. I mean, that's the deal of a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
stuff.
There obviously was like next to no scholarships back then either, but whatever,
Right. Yeah, that's
which is
still a
maybe a
great
little
rate.
changed.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a lot more expensive to go to Florida State today. I promise you that.
Yep.
So in the early 80s, you let go of hopelessness and discouragement to found this grassroots lobby called Results. Your goal was to harness the power of citizens to end global poverty. Now, when you speak about what drove you to start Results, you call it knowing your why and sharing it, or sometimes you say telling your story of self. So tell us that story. Why is it so important for you to share yours and for others to share theirs?
Okay, yeah, and I really want people to think about their story when I tell mine. And the Harvard professor Marshall Gans developed this story of self, and it basically asks what happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment, whatever your commitment is. And it's kind of a wacky story, but anyway, here it is. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music. And 44 years ago, I founded the Anti Poverty Lobby Results. A lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection there? And I look back in my life, there are certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend in high school, around high school graduation in 1964, and the assassination of US Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, 1977, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this thing thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. Well, it's inevitable because there must be no solutions in my mind. Because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this event, it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over. And my questions, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978, 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements in Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote him. I don't want to know if you met him, just the name. Out of 7,000 students asked, the number that could answer correctly was
One.
200, fewer than 3%. 6,800, over 70, sorry, over 97% could not tell me
Yeah.
the name of their member of Congress. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington. So it's kind of a wacky journey from music to advocacy.
Mm. Wow, what a journey. That's unbelievable. In 2012, you founded Civic Courage, and this organization helps NGOs to train members to create champions in Congress and the media for their cause. So many of the college students who are listening right now, they have causes that they are very passionate about. I mean, Gen Z, they are all kinds of causes that they feel, a lot of just passion around. How do you create these champions in Congress and the media for whatever your cause is?
Okay, so let me say what people should. Well, I'm going to make the distinction between transactional advocacy and transformational. Um, sign the petition,
Hmm.
transaction complete. That's not what the book is about. The book is about transformational advocacy, where you're trained, encouraged, and then succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue, or have a letter to the editor published on something you care about. And when you do things like that, you see yourself in a new light. You see yourself differently. A transformation has taken place. And so, you want to engage with an organization that delivers transformational advocacy. So I'm going to give you 3 ingredients that you can find. And I think in the program notes, you're going to include a sign-up sheet. And the sign-up sheet includes, like, do you want to know more information on these 4 organizations that work to deliver transformational advocacy? And oversimplifies, this is what they deliver. One, it's recruitment and community building. They bring new people in, form them into chapters so you're not acting all by yourself. That's the recruitment part. The community building is they might have a monthly webinar with guest speakers and Q&A and inspiration. One, recruitment and community building. The organization provides training. How do you get the meeting? How do you plan for the meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter? Two, training. 3 is breakthroughs. The organization encourages you to do the things you never thought you could do. They encourage breakthroughs. In the book, there's a drawing, a small circle labeled your comfort zone, and a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens.
Right.
You're looking for an organization that won't kick you out of your comfort zone, but encourage you out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens. So my answer to the question, rather than what do you do? Well, in a sense, what you do is join and connect with an organization that can empower you, that works to deliver transformational advocacy. And if you use that sign up link, that form, you'll be able to let me know that you want to know how to connect to those groups.
Fantastic. I hope everyone uses that sign up in the show notes. Really good stuff. I want to talk about your book. It's called Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. You know that we're in the midst of a very heated presidential election here in this country. And I'm noticing much less compromise and working across the aisle today. Just in watching the DNC, I did see that there were a few Republicans that were speaking there last night. So I thought that that was somewhat interesting. But why has this political divide become so wide between the Republicans and the Democrats? And how do
Yeah.
we go back to a time, you and I know that time, when people actually compromised and it
Yeah.
was collaboration across the aisle?
Yeah. So I want to focus a bit more on how do we go back, in a sense, to that time. I
Mhm.
mean, the reasons include social media.
Mm.
It can be harsher, and rather than this, it can be more like this. And there are many other reasons. The money in politics that skews things. poorly. How do we go back when I'm coaching a group that's meeting with a member of Congress who opposes their bill?
Mm-hmm.
I have them ask 3 questions. We know you don't support this bill. What would it take to change your mind? Now you're listening for assignments. So I'm going to give it an example of someone who did. What would it take to change your mind? 2, could you say more about that? 3, why do you think that is? And I'm thinking about a fellow from Pennsylvania who wanted to create a House Climate Solutions Caucus with a lead Republican, a lead Democrat down in South Florida, because he figured sea level rise was a concern and there were Democratic and Republican Congress people down there. And he asked a member of Congress, what would it take to change your mind? And the member of Congress said, well, if you could get the chambers of commerce on board. And he did. Miami, Miami Beach, Coral Gables, South Miami, North Miami, comes back with letters from the chambers of commerce presidents. And the congressman says, well, if you could get the mayors on board. And he did.
And he did.
And he comes back with letters from the mayors, and they launched a Climate Solutions Caucus in 2016 with 10 Republicans by the end of the year and 10 Democrats, because it was Noah's Ark. You couldn't get on if as a Democrat without a Republican or vice versa.
Mm.
And when Donald Trump was elected, it fell to 6 and 6 because some retired or some had lost their race or whatever. And during the first 2 years of President Trump's term, it grew to 45 Republicans and 45 Democrats.
Wow.
Because people were in the game, people were in the long game, people were asking, we know you don't support this. What would it take to change your mind? And people hadn't given up. So you ask, well, how do we get back? It's kind of like we could say, well, they're fighting all the time. Well, why don't we get in there and ask them to work together more? And that's what transformational advocacy is really about. And, that sign-up sheet will connect you with organizations that do that part, not this part, but connecting that way.
Really good stuff. That's a great resource. I want to talk about elections because you also mentioned that the midterm elections back in 2022 had the second largest youth turnout for a midterm ever, and only 23% of youth voted. So, what can we do to turn this apathy in our young folks into engaged voters?
Yes, so I'm going to address that, but I don't want to put it all on the youth. Let me give another couple of stats, and then we'll get to the youth vote thing. When Donald Trump was elected, 100 million Americans didn't vote, not youth, just everyone. 4 years later, when Joe Biden was elected, it was it was the largest voter turnout in 120 years, and 80 million, not youth, just people, didn't vote. So you can put it in context. It's not like, and now the youth turnout is often lower, but still, it's not like everyone else is showing up
Right.
at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, again, I think I really want young people to think about voting as an entry point. In other words, it's like we don't want to, actually, we want to hire people to do these jobs with Congress, city council. Fraternities have to deal with city councils, actually elected officials, or ignore them and kind of experience the result of whatever they do. But the point is, but we don't want to just hire them. It's not like you want to hire someone and leave them there without any adult supervision, kind of thing. You wouldn't hire a new employee and never check in and never make suggestions, kind of thing. And so, what do you care about? What's an issue for you? I mean, is there something about hunger in your community? Is there something about the environment or climate? Is there something about peace issues? Is there something about climate change, etc. What do you care about?
Mm.
And in the biggest picture, it gets exercised and addressed in Congress and in the president. And so we really want to kind of link that we can care about stuff and not have to give up on it. I don't know. I'd love to go to one other topic. I've been interviewed on a number of national NPR programs. One is called Here and Now, and another is called 1A. And on 1A, and I think it goes to like 300 stations around the country, I want to read you the second question he asked me because I think it speaks to the hopelessness that's in so many people. I mean, he was really being vulnerable in this question. This was the question. He said, the passive nature to our politics now, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career and I feel, this is the host, this is my career and I feel beat down by it. It's much more of an effort for me. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you knew that. What am I feeling? What's the way out of that? I'm not an activist, but you know what I'm saying. And so the first thing I said to him was, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're the crew. Well, are we?
Mm.
And if we're crew, how does crew operate? And the second quote, I love this one. It's from futurist and climate activist Alex Steffen, who said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything about it. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? And so I think those quotes fall into your question about the youth vote. We aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth. We are the crew, like it or not. And these days, cynicism is obedience. And, we really need to get in the game.
Yeah, that's a great message. I love that. I wanted to talk to you about the media too, because it seems like the media loves to write tons of negative stories about our industry, about fraternity and sorority members, but they don't really cover all the good work that's being done in terms of community service or raising money for various charities. So, in your opinion, how do we better work with the media in order to get positive PR?
Well, let me say two things: relationship and training. And so it might be that you engage with one of the groups I recommend through that sign-up sheet, and you get trained on working with the media, whether it's writing letters to the editor or talking to a reporter or being interviewed on a show. The point is, um, you really want to know what your message is, and you really want to build a relationship.
Mm.
And I always say, if you meet with the editorial writer and they say no, doesn't matter. It's step one to a yes. It's step one to a relationship. And so, my question is whether you're the fraternity or the fraternity council,
Mhm.
how much is your fraternity or the fraternity council in the way of a person or a little committee or a person or a little committee? How much are you working with the media? How much are you reaching out to the media? And I want to tell another story. Before this book came out, Reclaiming Our Democracy, I had a little team of friends that I was working with. We wrote to 350 journalists about a specific piece of theirs, quoting back to them their piece, and then saying how it related to reclaiming our democracy.
Mhm.
Well, 127 wrote back before the book came out in January, asking for an advance copy of the book. I'm not saying they opened it, but they asked for a campaign. 220 never wrote us back. I
Wow.
mean, we wrote 2 or 3 or 4 times. 220 never wrote us back. So I talk about I'm in my period of collecting no's. The more no's I can collect, the more yeses there will be buried in there. I mean, the largest radio interview I did Here and Now, I wrote 3 times, 4 times, never heard back. And then at the end of December, I get an email saying, Deepa Fernandez would like to interview you. Could you be at our studio in DC on January 5th? Yeah, I can. Never heard back until that moment. So, I need people to really think about uh, this is not a yes game, it's a no game.
Mm.
Collecting those no's to get to the yeses.
Mhm.
And I'm in that right now myself.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about building relationships, and I think this is really critical, not only for the media, but also for elected officials, because we often have difficulties in the community. I'm thinking about some of the zoning laws that have come out against fraternity houses, and sometimes conflicts between the undergraduate students and the families that occupy these homes near all of the colleges and universities. So, is there a specific way that you go about building better relationships with elected officials?
Well, I mean, it's number one, it's kind of knowing who they are and calling up and asking, sorry, for an appointment and meeting with them, not in a this way, but how can we work together? I mean, if they're opposed, I mean, if there's something that's come before the council or is about to, and you somehow know that they're not on your side, what would it take to change your mind? Could you say more about that? Why do you think that is? Those kinds of questions that build relationship rather than get that to that final vote when you're shouting on this side and shouting on that side. Uh, you know, Build those relationships with the council, the homeowners, the whomever it is, to see where there's the middle ground. That's the compromise you talked about
Mhm.
earlier. Not my way or the highway, but how can we solve this
Mhm.
in a way that's mutually beneficial?
I like that. Mutually beneficial, right? It's not just about your objectives, it's also listening to their objectives, more importantly. And so I think that's really the key right there. In the book, you talk about generating transformational advocacy, and there are 18 commitments. What are some
Right.
of those important commitments that you were talking about in the book?
Yeah. And so I'm going to go back to the ones that I mentioned earlier, the commitments from the organization so they can deliver something power. And some of them are for the advocates themselves, is that recruitment and community building. Are they bringing people in and building community, not leaving them high and dry, a
Mhm.
kind of not bowling alone kind of thing? And number two, training. Are they training or not? Not really. I'm going to give you a couple of key statistics in a second. And three is uh, breakthroughs. Are they encouraging breakthroughs? The Congressional Management Foundation asked uh, grassroots advocacy professional staff what their primary tactic was. And 79% said their primary tactic was an email form letter. Give me your name and your zip code, and we'll send the email for you. Well, only 3% of congressional staff said an email form letter is highly effective in making their office's decisions. 94% said an in-person constituent issue meeting was either very effective or effective. So 3% said the email form letter, 94% said in-person issue meeting by constituents, that's you, is either effective or highly effective. And so, yeah, we need to think about that when we get involved.
Yeah, great strategy. Really good stuff. This has been a lot of fun. My weakness is always good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. So the next time I find myself in Princeton, New Jersey, where should I be going for a great meal in town?
Now, if you called any of my family members and asked them what I would say, they would tell you what I would say. directly across the street from Princeton University is Diesel and Duke, which has these amazing French fries. Amazing. And actually, I'm a vegetarian for 34 years. And they have this veggie burger that's also awesome. And Diesel and Duke is my go-to place.
All right, Diesel and Duke it is for fries. We're gonna head over there and test them out. I can't wait to give that a shot. All right, so if our audience, if they want to buy your book, where should they be going in order to connect with you and then get the book? It's called Reclaiming Our Democracy: Every
Right.
Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy.
Yeah, well, reclaimingourdemocracy.com is where you can find ways to get the book. The sign-up sheet is also there. And the other thing is, I'm going to just mention, I'm going to be speaking at in early and mid-September. I'm thinking about it for your campus. I'm going to be speaking at the University of Miami and Florida International University, FIU. I'm going to be speaking at Stanford also in September. So one of the things on the sign-up form is, sorry, a speaking opportunity. So whether it might be your fraternity or fraternity council or campus or a course you're in or whatever, you might think about that too.
Fantastic. Go and check out the website. There you can buy the book. You're going to be able to get the sign-up sheet, and you have an opportunity to get Sam to come to your campus and to come and speak. And I can't think of a better speaker as we approach this election cycle. So it's very, very timely. And thank you so much for sharing all this great information with us today, Sam.
It's a thrill. Thanks so much.
Of course, to our audience, if you enjoyed this conversation with Sam, I want you to like this and I want you to share this with other students that are engaged with our democracy and the upcoming election. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.